Hello and welcome to Cyberside Chats. My name is Sherri Davidoff,
I'm Matt Duran.
and today we're going to talk about your CRM and why it is a goldmine for attackers.
It is.
Now, this week we've been dealing with the fallout from the charter breach. Once again, Shiny Hunters has gone after Salesforce, and in this case, we know that they have sucked out at least 4.9 million people's information.
Individual records, yeah.
According to Have I Been Pwned, that has been independently verified by them. The hackers actually claim to have exported 42 million records. We'll see how that all shakes out.
Fun fact, I looked, I'm in there.
Oh, great. Charter released a statement saying that no customer information is compromised, but the evidence is not currently supporting that.
Yes.
Now, this comes on the heels of a whole raft of Salesforce breaches that we've been seeing over the years, specifically perpetuated by the Shiny Hunters group.
Shiny Hunter seems to be really big at and going after CRM software because, I mean, it's a gold mine of data, as we just said, but it also seems like it's through social engineering techniques, like a reasonably simple system for them to access.
Yeah, in some cases. And also we're seeing that breaches lead directly to more breaches.
Yes.
So once they've compromised one Salesforce instance, they can often get access to others. And we're going to walk through how that occurs.
Right.
Now, this year we've seen Google's Salesforce hacked, Cisco, Qantas, Air France, you name it, dozens and dozens of organizations.
It's a long list.
Is one of these yours? Quite possibly. So we're going to start talking today about really two questions. Why are adversaries targeting CRMs and how do you protect your organization? So let's start dissecting these and dig in. Want to talk about Charter first?
Oh, yeah, let's talk about Charter first. So based on the information that we have about the Charter incident so far, we know that this was, again, a social engineering attack.
Yeah, vishing, voice phishing.
Yeah, voice
so
phishing.
they compromised Charter through a voice phishing attack. They were able to gain access to an employee's Microsoft Entra account.
Yep.
And we're seeing this playbook over and
over. This has been repeating for like 18 months at this point. I mean, it's a common attack pattern, and it's one of the easiest ways they have to get into those organizations. I mean, they find an employee on LinkedIn, they find their employee identification numbers.
Identity is the theme of the year, and it was not a platform bug, it was not malware, it was literally just a phone call.
Oh yeah, they didn't get hacked. Like someone called and asked for entrance, and they were given it.
Yeah. So they got in on April 1st. By May 23rd, Charter had appeared on the Shiny Hunters leak site.
Right.
They had a deadline of May 27th, pay or the information will be leaked. And of course, on May 28th, they didn't pay, obviously. Well, it seems like, because the data went public at that point.
So Charter was pretty clear about this. They said no sensitive personal information or network information had been leaked.
Right. But the data is out there. And again, according to Have I Been Pwned, who independently verified this, there's approximately 4.9 million people's information, including, and this is interesting, about 85,000 employee records. And I think often people forget that your employee records alone are very valuable and can be used to further compromise into your organization.
Sure. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So, I mean, again, the question we want to bring up here is why are attackers targeting CRM software?
Well, first of all, one system can have information on dozens or hundreds or thousands of people or other organizations. And you might think, oh, what could be in a CRM? Just contact information. No, it's often all kinds of info, especially when you get into organizations that use those for customer support, because you might see everything ranging from credit card numbers in notes fields to API keys that have been pasted in, all kinds of stuff.
We're going to get to API keys in just a minute.
And these are things where, your security team might say, no, our customer support personnel would never put that information in Salesforce. And then once that data is leaked, you start going through it. And yes, it is in there.
It is. Yeah, it is in there. When we have freeform text fields, I think this, we've seen this with multiple other organizations who have been hacked. I mean, if there's a freeform text field, people will put things in there that aren't supposed to be there.
Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
just be real about that.
We really need to start including that in data inventory systems
we
as
do.
well.
Yeah.
Just check. I think this also ties with the trend we're seeing of extortion using exposed data, rather extortion that locks up your computer with ransomware, things like that.
So I went through the Verizon DBAR a little bit earlier today, and what they were talking about is the increase in extortion versus ransomware.
Well,
I think,
data exposure.
data exposure, and I think
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a big jump in that because I mean, one, it's easier just to steal data and then hold people hostage for it,
Yeah.
and two, I mean, it's a solid leverage technique against like a lot of
These days,
companies. Yeah,
yes. And it can also fuel the next attack. You
right.
can use
Yeah,
that info, you can sell to other criminals, you can threaten to release it and get payments. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do once you steal information.
right, right.
Whereas ransomware is hard. You have to keep track of public private keys, you have to make sure your malware works. It's like, hard. It's
No,
like
no, it's
whatever.
work. Yeah,
It's
no,
easier to
let's be real
smack,
about
to
that.
grab, and then threaten.
But no, when we look at this, I mean, I think the big thing is like we're seeing a big, I guess, spate of these kind of attacks happening simply because of social engineering, and I think that's something that I mean we talk to our clients about it. Having those kind of protections, having identity verification at the help desk, having that kind of level
Yeah.
of security is really important, and a lot of people overlook
Real
that. Yeah,
strong multi-factor authentication, not like type in a PIN
yeah,
because
yeah.
the bad guys are really good at stealing those these days.
You know, I like to think about this. So when I was young, I had a dog named Daisy.
Okay.
And I,
I can probably break
yeah,
into half your accounts
and
now.
exactly, and
Was she your first pet?
she was my first pet. Yes, there we go. Those kind of things, though. I mean, that's the kind of information that people are stealing that
Oh, okay.
like gets them through the help desk. It's that security by trivia thing that just drives me nuts.
Well,
But
I've thought for many years it's really interesting how breaches lead to more breaches.
right,
Like they create that systemic risk. And I also think that's what we're seeing in the Salesforce cases as well. And the Gainsight story is a perfect example
yeah,
of that.
yeah,
So to go through this, hackers were able to break into Salesloft,
yeah.
which
Sales
was
loft.
a development company behind the Drift app. This was like an AI chatbot.
Yes, which is responsible for like a lot of sales for people too. Like,
Yeah,
I don't want to minimize Drift's presence
right.
on Salesforce. Yeah.
And so, doing that, they were able to pull OAuth tokens that gave them access to the Salesforce instances of over 760 organizations.
Yep.
So, again, they break into one developer company, they steal the OAuth tokens that give them access to customer platforms, and they silently exfiltrate data from dozens and dozens of companies. Now, one of the companies they got access to was actually another development company, Gainsight, which
Hmm.
is a second Salesforce app.
Yeah.
Now, once they got access to Gainsight, they were able to spelunk through customer support records, tickets, things like that. And from there, they were able to steal things like, well, API keys, other
Well,
sensitive information.
I mean, it was like 200 more organizations
Yes.
that got hacked because of
So
that,
they
right? Like,
stole all
yeah,
this information from customer support conversations, and they were then able to gain access to 200 more
yeah.
Salesforce instances. And these were, in many cases, big, big companies.
Hmm.
So this is a perfect example of where we have verified on the public record one breach has led directly to another Salesforce breach.
Yeah.
And think about how many more of these cases have not been publicized necessarily.
Well, I mean, in a lot of cases, the data that's stolen doesn't really classify as PHI or PII or something like that. So, unless a company is willing to go forward and say that they've suffered some kind of data security incident, the requirements behind that are a little dubious at this point. And I think
Yeah.
that's where we see that kind of misgiving in reporting these things.
So
That's
more recently,
yeah,
we
Aura.
had the Aura case. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to go through that?
God, Aura. Yeah. In the or in March of 2026, Salesforce issued an advisory to their customers that said that groups like shiny hunters, which I want to take a step back here. When we talk about shiny hunters or something like that, I mean they're not necessarily like a unified group. It's like a bunch of people who are just operating under
And they
that
use
moniker.
the
Yeah.
label Shiny Hunters, kind of like Anonymous, except now there's like a website. for it.
Similar to it, yeah, yeah. But I mean, they let people know that there was a misconfiguration in their Experience Cloud site that was allowing people to use basically guest access to gain access to information that was being held by those companies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
these guest accounts, so anyone could log in as guest,
right.
and then these accounts were over provisioned. Again, an identity issue. You want to have the principle of least privilege, like don't give a guest access to anything. But in this case, guest accounts could actually query the CRM
Yeah.
and get information. 2 days after Salesforce made this announcement, all of a sudden, boom, Shiny Hunters posted on their leak site that they were going to release data from several hundred companies. So
Yep.
this was not like an immediate thing that they had just done. This could potentially have been going on for months, if not years.
Sure.
But they threatened to leak data from several hundred companies starting on March 14th unless their ransom was paid.
Yes.
And well, what happened? they started releasing info.
Yeah, they followed through on their promise. They did what they said they were going to
Yeah.
do.
They
And
broke
yeah.
in. They didn't break. I guess, does this count as a break-in?
No, I don't know. It's
They
it's a
logged
feature,
in.
not a bug, like,
They
right?
used the guest accounts. They exported data. It was supposed to be capped at 2,000 records,
Yes.
but
Although, as we found, there are multiple different ways to get it. I mean,
there were
like,
bypasses
yeah.
that are publicly known.
No, we
And
looked right before the podcast. I mean, there's an entire Reddit thread on how to
yeah.
bypass that limit. So, like, yeah, it's easy enough to do.
So they were able to exfiltrate data, and often that doesn't set up and send up any alarms or red flags or anything like that.
Well, because
Um,
nobody's watching the exit. Like, yeah,
Right. And that's like probably the number one thing I think people need to do is like
yeah,
watch your data exfiltration. Don't watch, like block. Why should someone be able to exfiltrate 4.9 million people's records
right.
using one account? Like maybe let's like pause,
No,
slow it
like
down,
in my
get
mind,
a
there should
second
be.
person to approve.
Yeah, no, there should be bells and whistles going off at that point, like
Yeah.
letting you know that much data is leaving your environment, and we don't see that very
Right.
often, especially with SaaS platforms like Salesforce, which is, I mean, they have DLP software and controls you can add in, but it seems like a lot of people just aren't watching.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and the techniques that they use for this have been known literally for years.
Oh yeah.
In January, Mandiant released a tool called Aura Inspector, not related to the company.
Uh-huh.
And that was an auditing tool designed to help admins find these misconfigurations and close them.
And then what happened?
Well, the bad guys use that tool to find their victims.
Yes, exactly.
It cuts both ways, unfortunately.
Ugh.
So shiny hunters did end up following through. They started to name the companies that didn't pay. One of them, ironically, was the identity protection company Aura, no
Uh-huh.
relation to the tool.
Different to the tool, yeah.
And yeah, that is ironic because the fact that Aura was broken into, the stolen data included things like names, emails, home addresses. And this is exactly the type of information that its members signed up to protect.
Yeah, Aura's an identity protection company,
You
right?
make this stuff up,
Oh,
people.
God.
It's so hard. Can I sign up for identity protection anonymously so I'm not spreading my information around more?
No.
You know what this reminds me of?
What?
Equifax.
Oh, God.
When you had to like give them a bunch of information in order to see if your information had been leaked after they got totally pwned.
Do you remember the
lost
researchers that were
145 million Americans' records?
Well, and they asked for what, like the last 7 digits of your social security number or
Yes.
something like that, and then people were putting in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and being told that yes, your information was compromised. It was just
what a blast
cluster at that point.
I don't know. Somebody probably has that social. Probably at least a bunch of people.
Well, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the real failure here? Like drilling down, what are we missing?
Well, there's a couple of things. So when we are dealing with a SaaS platform like Salesforce, as an example, I mean, and we've had this in a couple of calls with other clients, like in fact, somewhat recently. There is not a solid control to see when data leaves those applications.
Or often it's not set up so you have visibility.
Right,
So
yeah.
you don't have visibility when data is exfiltrated. Backing up even more, you don't have ways to block data
Sure.
exfiltration or
Yeah.
cap data exfiltration. There's often no principle of least privilege.
That's a
so
big one.
one account has access to everything because why not? It makes it easy.
Well, and when we look at things like an export cap on those in those systems, like sure, there are some controls put in place to restrict to a point, I guess, the amount of data you can pull out. But like there can be. But as we've seen before, I mean, there's tons of ways to bypass that limit and just pull realistically whatever you want to from them.
Yeah. I mean, would you run your email? Would you run your file storage this way? No. You want to apply those same controls to your cloud apps, things like Salesforce. It really is like it has a lot of sensitive information in it. And so we need to start protecting it.
No, totally.
Especially because it's being targeted.
Yes.
All right, should we dig into our takeaways?
Oh, let's do it.
All right, what's number one?
All right, so make sure that you are watching your CRM software as carefully as you would with your email, file storage, any other system you have that holds sensitive data. Remember, you already wrap your controls in on a lot of these applications. So Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, all those things.
Right before our podcast, I started researching. I was like, is there a DLP for Salesforce? And there is.
There is.
There absolutely is. But we're not really taking advantage of it.
A lot of people aren't. And we've seen that pop up in multiple different situations. In fact, a lot of times people just don't even know it exists, which, we want to make sure we're using those tools. We are protecting that data because it is important, and we are just not leaving it out there as an easy open door for people to walk through and grab, like with
Yeah.
Snowflake as an example.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Lock down who can log in. So really make sure you're controlling those identities. Do people really need access to your Salesforce instance? Make sure and if they do they have strong phishing resistant multi-factor authentication? Are you properly verifying identity before granting access? Almost every CRM breach this year started with some kind of compromised
yeah.
or socially engineered login. So it's really the account takeover piece. That's where they're getting their foot in the door,
Yeah.
one way or the other. Even when they're stealing auth tokens, it starts with a foot in the door
Oh no, identity and access
to an
management.
account
Yeah.
somewhere.
That's your key
Yeah.
there. The next, and this leads right into what you were saying here, but I mean, the principle of least privilege needs to apply to all of these systems.
Yeah.
So limit access, limit who can get into what.
And limit the blast
Yes.
radius. Like, does every member of your sales team need access to every single record in there?
Right.
Try to dial it back.
Yes, exactly.
Inventory your connected apps, your OAuth tokens. Ask yourself, do we really need this connected app? I would actually back that up even further and say require some kind of vetting before people approve a connected
Yeah.
app. We've talked about that on this podcast in
We
the
have.
past. But anyway, inventory your connected apps and OAuth tokens and restrict as much as you can.
Sure. And then finally, I mean, we tend to put a lot of emphasis on watching who can log into an application,
Yeah.
who can get access
Watch
to it.
the exits.
Watch the exit.
Not just the
Yeah.
entrances.
So, I mean, when somebody has trusted access, if they steal credentials, if they're able to make their way into that system, if they can just export whatever, and we're not paying attention to it, then we leave ourselves open to again mass data theft, which is what a lot of these instances come down to.
Absolutely. Include exfiltration in your SIM, in your monitoring. Cap it so they can't just bulk export 4.9 million records
Yes.
without anybody knowing. Ideally, you want to have some roadblocks there. I think all those things are important and would stop these in their tracks.
Yeah.
Can really mean the difference between a breach or just a normal day at work.
Well, and none of these things are revolutionary. That's the problem. Like
Yeah.
these are all just like old school IT,
They're
basics.
so boring.
Yeah,
I'd
exactly.
rather get some cool tool with bells and whistles and drop it in and just have it give us security. But
No,
no,
I just want a system
it's
that's
the
locked
boring
down.
stuff.
Like, yeah,
Boring
that's
stuff.
what I would go for.
All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate you joining us today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on Cyberside Chats.